Good evening. Thank you. Good to see everyone here this evening, especially if you're visiting with us. Thank you for being here, for joining us online. And I know many of you are. Thank you for joining us as well. We're going to be making just a few announcements, names of folks who are in need of prayer. I'm assuming Wheeler Howard will be leading us in a couple of songs, and then we'll have a prayer and be dismissed to our Bible classes. Foster Caffey is in Washington Hospital Center recovering for mitral valve repair surgery that he had yesterday. They were able to the valve, didn't have to replace it. He was in ICU. He was just waiting to get into a room, but he spent last night in ICU. He'll be in a room there for a few more days, but everything went well, so we're thankful about that. Vanessa Bates is home, so we're very thankful about that. They thought but they didn't, and she improved rapidly when she started to improve, and she's home now, so we're thankful for that. Juanita Bullard still recovering and still receiving treatments daily, and so we need to be keeping her in prayers. Trish has been transferred to a rehabilitation facility in Aldi, so as we get her room number and an address, we'll make that available to you. We mentioned that Billy Lawrence has a severe bacterial infection and it's caused partial paralysis. And so anyway, we've run into he's living in New Braunfels, Texas, has been for a couple of years now. And so he really misses being here with us. So let's be sending him cards. Let's not forget to be praying for both Jairus and Juanita. We have a sign-up sheet again for the upcoming week to take dinners to them. That's in the. Please, if you can take them dinner one night, give them a call. I put both their phone numbers on the sign-up sheet in case you didn't have them both, and take something to them. That is greatly appreciated. So anyway, I want to mention that to you as well. Who's fighting cancer? Foster Caffey, Janine Easterwood, Cindy Welch, Raina Ramirez, Margaret Michaud, Jessica Tira, Terry Folker, Chris Bradley, Irvin Jackson, and Sunday we added the name of Rosemarie Jean, Hugh's mother, whose cancer has returned, and they're going to be making treatment decisions in the upcoming weeks. So let's keep Rosemarie in our prayers. She's visited us several times. Hugh's folks have been here several times, and we've gotten to meet them and know them. They're a wonderful brother and sister in Christ. Let's be praying for her as she will be again. Just some upcoming events, a lot of youth group events. On March the 22nd, the youth group will be packing up our Nourishing Ninja bags. And so did want to mention that. That will happen immediately after AM services, and that's going to be a great service project. The Nourishing Ninja bags, we are still in need of just about everything. We haven't filled out any of our needs for Nourishing Ninjas. And so you can be bringing those in up through Sunday morning, I guess, the 22nd. But the bags will be put together that afternoon and then delivered in the next day or so. Cougar Elementary and Manassas Park Elementary School. So grab the list, be bringing things in as you have opportunity. We're going to be putting together 250 bags to help at-risk children have food during their spring break. So it's an important work that we do, and we participate in it. On March 28th, the youth group will have a devotional. Details in your bulletin from tonight. There's a Fredericksburg Nationals game planned for the 18th, and of course, senior banquet on the 3rd. High school seniors, please sign up. Get to us for the board, for the graduation board, as soon as possible. We can't put it up if we don't have it here in the office. So we want to begin to mention all of those things. Other upcoming March events: ladies retreat on the weekend of the 20th through the 22nd. Monday night for the master. There's a fifth Sunday potluck on the 29th. And we're already advertising Worship in the Woods in April at Camp Omava. There was a huge event last year. A lot of folks went and had a wonderful time. And so that's in your announcements as well. Manassas Kids Spring Celebration is April the 4th. Details in your bulletin. Sign-up sheet for that as well. And so we don't want to mention all those things to you. Okay. At this time, let's lift our voices together and sing praise to God.
Tonight we'll sing two songs, the first of which is number 77 in your hymnal. Number 77, Breathe on Me, Breath of God. We'll sing all four verses. Breathe on me, breath of God, fill me with life anew, that I may love what thou dost love, and do what thou wouldst do. Breathe on me, breath of God, until my heart is pure, until with thee I will one will to do and to endure. Breathe on me, breath of God, till I am wholly thine, till all this earthly part of me glows with thy fire divine. Breathe on me, breath of God, so shall I never die, but live with thee the perfect life of thine eternity. And our second song tonight, the song before our opening or closing prayer, is number 154, Give Me the Bible. We'll sing verses 1, 2, and 4. Give me the Bible, star of gladness, gleaming to cheer the wanderer, lone and tempest-tossed. No storms can hide that radiance peaceful beaming, since Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Give me the holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternity. Give me the Bible when my heart is broken, when sin and grief have filled my soul with fear. Give me the precious words by Jesus spoken, hold to show my Savior near. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and shining, till night shall vanish in eternal day. Give me the Bible, lamp of life immortal, hold up that splendor by the open grave. Show me the light from heaven's shining portals, show me the glory gilding Jordan's wave. Give me the Bible, holy message shining, thy light shall guide me in the narrow way. Precept and promise, law and love combining, till night shall vanish in eternal day.
Will you bow with me? God, thank you for this beautiful day today, and I want to bring up how spring break is coming up soon, and there's going to be a lot of people on the roads, and we want to pray that everyone gets home safely, from college especially. I also want to pray for everyone who's and help everyone who has cancer and all the diseases. I want to pray for everybody in our classes tonight and help the teachers teach and help everyone else learn and take in the wisdom of God. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Love how everybody stares at you when you're coming up here. You better get it. And I know what you're thinking. Where you been? You know, this is maybe the second or third time I've taught Daniel in one class or another. And the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 days that I was in India, I knew this was coming. Up the second part from Mel. And by the time you make your rounds in India, you're pretty comfortable about what you're going to say, what you're going to preach or teach or whatever as you get close there towards the end. Everything's kind of lined out, at least for me. You know, I just want to be able to wake up and pick up a set of notes and go at it. And I had a little more time to start working on my notes for the class. So I'm in the kitchen at the house over there in Tulsi home. Jairus and Juanita well know, and I'm sitting there and I'm taking notes and I'm writing down Daniel. And next morning is a Sunday morning, and I have to give a sermon there. And so one of the brothers comes up to me, "Brother, are you preaching on Daniel tomorrow?" And I says, "No, I'm trying to get my notes ready for a class that I got to do 2 weeks after I get back." And he says, "Oh, brother," he says, "no, this is a good class, you know, chapter 1 and chapter 2. And I said, no, I have to teach chapter 7 to." And he went, "Oh, brother, this is hard." And I said, "Thank you for that encouragement." Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is you're going to allow me just to get warmed up a little bit here. Been a while since I've been in front of a class, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time about talking just a kind of a review, a very large scale review and overview of the first 6 chapters and about Daniel in general. I'm certainly not going to repeat anything in detail that Mel's already taught, but if you've been in a class with me, I'll spend 10, 15 minutes on just reviewing from the material that was there before. I always say review is good for the soul, repetition is good for the mind, and I need it more than you do. So I like doing that. And I want to be able to talk about it in this way because we're getting into primarily prophecy. And even though we get these dreams in these first 6 chapters, chapters 7 through 12 is more of a prophecy section, and it's situated that way for a purpose. Some, if you read the commentaries, try to section off Daniel between the languages that he wrote it in. I think he does Hebrew for first chapter and a half, and then it's Aramaic from chapter 2 all the way through most of the way through chapter 7. And people struggle with that, and they said, that's too hard. Let's just do the stories 1 through 6 together in the prophecy. But they fit very well together, and we have to understand why and how that works. What was a bunch of problems and issues that had to be overcome changes and transitions into these chapters that talk about the prophecy of who's in control no matter what happens, and a detailed history and the likes of that sort of thing. The other thing I really like to do, especially with this book, is to be able to teach myself and to teach the class. If nothing else, you should be able to know what's in these chapters. What's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I usually cheat. I usually find in flight school, we had all these procedures we had to learn. And we came up with all these little bizarre ways of remembering what they were. So bizarre that you didn't really want to share them with anybody. You just said, look, I know this. And you didn't tell them that it was, a mouse went running through the house, and this is how I remember this. But I always remember the first 6. Of course, you have that first chapter was just the captivity, and we know what that's about. And I'm going to share some 1 or 2 verses from each of those chapters that help my mind get set on what the story was about. And of course, the second part is the second and third chapters are both about statues. First one is a dream of a statue, and the third chapter is a statue. And then, as you go to the last 3, you have what I call the 3 bigs. What are they? Chapter 4 is the big what? The big tree. Chapter 5 is the big party. And chapter 6 is the big lion. See, I use these things to help me remember. So if somebody says, where was the vision of the big tree? That's chapter 4. That's the first of the 3 bigs. And I kind of do it that way. And then I will kind of use scripture, and I did this on the first class I taught, to help understand to me, and this is a good challenge for you, a good study. You read a book in Daniel, or for any book you study for that matter, try to find the verse that defines the chapter. And I'll give you an example. This is what I do. Chapter 1, in the very first chapter, if you look in verse 9, we all know the story. We know what happens in chapter 9. We know how he resists. But he says in verse 9, do I have the right one? Hold on. Here it is. Verse 8. Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself in the king's choice of food. Daniel made up his mind. That's chapter 1 to me. And so I remember that, even though I called it verse 9. Now I remember it's verse 8. But I knew it was up there in front. Daniel makes this decision front that I've made up my mind, and this is the way it's going to be. And so I kind of remember that. Chapter 2, the one I like, is verse 21. We're talking about a God. We know what's going on in that chapter. We know there's this struggle of this king that's fallen. And then it tells us in verse 20, he is the one who changes the times and the epochs, and he removes the kings and establishes kings. Chapter 2 is God is in charge. Not the king of Babylon. God's in charge. And so I use a verse like that to help me remember what's going on in the chapter. Let me just share one more with you because it's in chapter 3. This to me, this verse here is the most representative verse in all these at least the first 6 verses or chapters of Daniel, because I love how this comes across. And it's in verse 18. And it starts. This is the setup. They're about to get thrown into this furnace, right? We know that story. That happens after he fails to worship the big statue. Probably Shadrach says, if it be so that they're going to this fire, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. And then the mic drop line in verse 18. Even if he doesn't. And I love that verse. It's such a verse of faith. Even if he doesn't, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image. Things like that. If you can go through a chapter, if you can find a way to remember the chapters, that may not work as well as the 24 chapters in Revelation, which you and I will start in the fall. But that's kind of the way I like to do it with Daniel, because there's just so many interesting stories. And the seventh is just as interesting. And I try to remember it the same way. You know, you're going to have these first 7 and 8 that's going to deal with animals. 7 is all the beasts, and chapter 8 is the ram and the goat. And then you have that midsection, that chapter 9, the prayer that some commentators will say is the best prayer ever written in the Bible, because it fits in line the 70 weeks of all the things that are already happening. And then 10, 11, and 12 are just the historical events that back up everything that happened in those first two chapters. So it all fits. It's not chronological, but it fits. And so that's why, that's kind of the approach I take. But so let me just start with making sure you're awake on a Wednesday night before the storms come. Let me ask you this question. And I know these are things that Mel has said at one point or another along the way. And I know that I can't remember what I said yesterday. Just ask Renee. So this may be a little bit of a challenge. But let me ask you this question. When did the story of Daniel, not the life of Daniel, when did the path of Daniel begin? What would you say? Huh? I'd go further back. Something had to promote the captivity. What happened in history that would promote this, where we would find Daniel where he is? My answer is about 1000 BC when Solomon gives up the kingdom. Right? That's where they split. That's where they, or not, who did I say? Solomon. That's where the kingdom split. That's when they started in Egypt and all these people, and they start getting punished for their evil ways, and Assyria comes down on top of Israel, and then, and then the Babylonians come down on top of Judah. So that's kind of where, if you want to look at it from that perspective, it's kind of where it starts. Because if that didn't happen, that maybe there would have never been that God put on top of Judah and Israel to be captured. But it was something that, Jeremiah prophesied, that the Babylonians and Nebuchadnezzar would take over Judah. And Isaiah prophesied that the Persian king Cyrus would give them a path to go back. So there's so much prophecy even before the prophecy comes to this section, so it should get us all excited about what's to happen. Because there's some rules of prophecy that we're going to talk about too before we get into prophecy. And so yeah, all these things happen. And then there's that magic date about 600 or 605 where Nebuchadnezzar fights Egypt on this big battle. Remember the name of the battle? Starts with a C. Carchemish? Did you mention that, Carchemish? This was the battle that kind of started the whole captivity thing when they came in and won. So, you don't want to make too much of a history lesson, but dates are good to know. So, here's something that happened in 970 BC that set the wheels rolling for something that was going to happen in 605 BC. And then we're going to get detailed prophecy of history that's going to take us all the way up to about 100 BC and even into the time of Christ. It's an amazing document, and it's just kind of fun to study and read. Why is Daniel unique? Why is the book of Daniel unique? I got my own reasons here, but this is also something good that you might want to share with somebody. Why do you study Daniel? What's unique about Daniel and his book to you?
Even if he doesn't deliver us, he's still correct.
Well, certainly in one way. Here's a guy that aged, 17? His freedom was gone. It was shot. Now, he prospered because he did those things. But it's unique because I don't think we find any other servant of God that just got taken up as a kid and never saw the light of day or his parents until dead or died. Yes?
Almost perfect balance between narrative and prophecy. In Jonah's narrative, there are narrative sections in Isaiah and the prophets, but they basically are either one or the other.
Yeah.
The thing about Daniel is that he's alive basically for the entire captivity experience.
Right.
And that's cool too, is that he's there pretty much from whenever he was taken, whether it was the earlier or the later, all the way to the almost up. He's there.
And it's just such an amazing story, and you just have to try to put yourself in his shoes or his sandals. You imagine some country coming here and taking your 17-year-old kid away. Yes, ma'am.
So I think it's a really good example of how to live in a world without succumbing to it as well. I mean, it's for a lot of the discussion of the Jewish people, they're they're having battles and skirmishes and things like that, and politics with other nations.
Right.
But in their community, it's just them. But Daniel is now having to live as a servant of God, surrounded by people have to choose God or prosperity. He chooses God, and then God allows him to prosper.
This is a classic case that you're not in Kansas anymore. Now, I don't have that situation, but you don't go far or travel far before you realize that you're not in Kansas anymore. And there's certain things that you do here that you can't do there, or at least not without being careful. And I'll give you one example. And Jairus, if you're watching out there, this is kind of a relatively new, they have a party out there called the RPP. It's a Hindu political group. And the most recent law that they're now trying to pass in the state, I forget the name of the state, but it's the state that Mumbai's in, which is a very huge state, covers from the west all the way toward the center. And it's that, and I'm trying to imagine how they'll enforce this, but you by the government in writing if you're going to change religions. So now imagine a Hindu saying, "Oh, Mr. Modi, excuse me, I'm going down the road here and become a Christian." That's why they want the registration. They don't want an official documentation of how many Christians. They want to find the people who want to convert and do who knows what. So it sounds like a ridiculous law. Can you imagine that happening in this country? But they could get away with that over there. And then, if you don't, and somebody finds out you're a Christian, then you're in a whole new bag of worms. So yeah, you have to adjust. And not just not eating hamburgers. I mean, you want to preach somewhere. Some of these brethren, and I always tell people, the work, I do stuff there, but the work doesn't start till I'm gone. These brothers will go to Hindu ceremonies and find a place off to and preach people who want to hear the gospel. And that's a big risk, but they do it, and most of the time they get away with it. You'll see some videos of people up in the mountains kind of chasing people with rods and beating them because they know they're trying to get into their village to teach Christianity. I've never seen anything like that, and these brothers keep me out of that. Whole new mindset of what you can do and what you can't do, and you have to learn along the way. And the other thing that's interesting about that is, and that's kind of the way we have to interpret this book with our present day needs. Because the other unique thing about Daniel is what's being taught back past and his present and his future. His past and present and future, not ours, or our past, not our future. But it's interesting because everything that Daniel does or interprets a dream or hears a prophecy, we're getting it from his side of that prophecy. And what 7 us to do is to get on the other side of that prophecy. And then it makes you appreciate why he was so scared, what troubled him, the dream problem that he had. And we're going to talk about dreams and visions because sometimes we just kind of write that off as, oh, he had a vision or a dream. Well, we've had dreams of our own that we wake up and for the first few seconds we're, what? You know? And we want to get out of that phase because we kind of wake up that way. I think these visions could have been terrifying that way and you're just stuck with it until the vision's over. And in one scenario we'll read here, it was terrifying to Daniel. And we have to kind of appreciate what and why he went through that. So, and we'll do that. I wrote down it's one of the most detailed, prophetically and historically accurate documents that we'll read in the Old Testament. You get that generally in other places, and like Barry said, sometimes it's just all narrative without the story, but not here. We talked about it confirms God's sovereignty over history, whether it's a spontaneous judgment or long-term. God keeps calling the shots. And I want you to keep that in mind when I ask you to define what a prophecy is. This particular document, as others, God shows how he uses those committed to being faithful with him. You don't have to have qualifications that you think you might need to have. God just says, you're willing, I'll show you the way. I tell people getting into the India work, I said, you can't pull a Moses. When you pray for an opportunity and God shows you an opportunity, that's not the time to step up and the wrong person, because I don't think he did. I think those things happen for a reason. We talked about it's a prophetic calendar and all those kind of things, all the way through Malachi and on into the New Testament. And then again, he promised. Number 3 person in the land makes us think of who else in the Old Testament? Similar situation. Joseph, except he made it to number 2. So now I'm not in a big hurry to get captured by some other country to see how far up the ladder I can go. But in both of these cases, both of these people were faithful servants, and they result. All right. We talked about how the 6 chapters, the first 6 chapters line up with the second 6 chapters, or 7 through 12. And we don't have a lot of key players in all these 12 books, do we? We have God, angels, we have Daniel. We have those that we call Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? That are really Hananiah, Azariah. What was the third one? Mishael. Now, okay, let me just tell this quick story. Hananiah and Mishael. When I first taught this class 13 years ago, something like that, I intentionally redirected the class's attention, and I started talking about how they talk about angels in here and kings, and that there's other places in the Bible that have other names for angels, only one other one. Just kind of got that mindset off. And I said, so let me just test your Old Testament knowledge. I said, there's kings and there's angels that have these names. I said, do you know who Hananiah is? And nobody was reacting. I said, is that a king? Was that the name of an angel? And I said, how about Azariah? That's a king. I'm pretty sure Azariah was a king. How about Mishael? And I had one taker that it was an angel, and nobody, at least if somebody knew, they didn't want to spoil what they knew I was trying to do to the class, right? I was having fun. Because we never get their names like that. We always get Daniel's, but it's always followed by the 3 slave names of his friends. It's never Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. It's Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So I always thought if you're going to study this, at least you ought to recognize next time I try to pull that on a class, at least it's not a king or an angel or something like that. But it's just good information. Okay, warming up for chapter 7. Not there yet. What's a prophecy? Define a prophecy. And I'll give you a hint, it's not fortune telling. Go ahead.
Depends on the word. Nabi is somebody who's just a spokesman who speaks for God, which can mean to foretell the future, but it can also mean to pronounce judgment, promise deliverance. Roe is a seer, someone who is looking into the future and seeing the future and recording it. So then both of them are translated. Prophet.
And it's interesting because in the Old Testament, there are times when God says, and I don't have the scriptures, but it basically says, if there's a prophet, God says, I'll use him. If he claims he's a prophet and he's just running around saying this, that, or the other thing, what happens to him is his. But if there's a prophet, God says, to use him. And what he says will happen, and that's how you'll know. Yes, sir.
In forecasting, there's predictions. That's what man does. Right. That's a guess.
Yes.
Prophecy is a fact given to you before the event. And it's only from God. So only he deals with facts in the future. Right. So there's a uniqueness here. There's a certainty factor that prophecy is always 100% certain, which predictions never are.
Right. And as we learn in Kings, a lot of times what comes out isn't what you want to hear. Right? I didn't want to hear that. Prophet, he speaks for God. Yeah, but that's not what I wanted to hear. Yes, ma'am.
You're starting to speak what I was going to say. In the New Testament, he's speaking about those certain kind of gifts that the person that had the gift of being able to speak within the heart of the person or someone that they're near. And the Lord also and that if it's of God, it will come true. Test the spirits and see if they can go.
That's how you know for sure. Because you'll see it take place. Did somebody else have a? So this is what I just wanted to read this because I like this. And you can go, as Barry said, of the word itself, definitions vary slightly, but this is one I like. It's a divinely inspired message, revelation, or prediction of the future that for the purposes of Daniel and other books like Zechariah and Ezekiel and Revelation and any other prophecies, verbal or apocalyptic, even to assure the reader that God is in control of this world and in control of his creation. That's a prophecy. I like that definition. A little wordy, but it gives you the right idea of what you're dealing with in chapters 7 through 12. So I like that. One last rules of prophecy I wanted to share with you that I thought were worth as we go forward. Rule number 1, examine all the context when you're reading prophecy. Not only just in the section or chapter that you're reading, but I can almost guarantee, and when we get to Revelation, we'll prove this the same way, you'll find the images or the scenario similar in other prophetic books in the Old Testament. You got to dig a little bit, but they're there. So make sure it all fits. You know, you can't have one prophecy that's talking about a specific thing and then say, well, here's the same thing in Jeremiah, but it must be different. They're not different. They're there for a reason. And when we read all these different visions and stuff, we're surprised and amazed, but the people who were hearing that at the time, they weren't surprised or amazed. They knew the Old Testament. They knew what all those creatures meant. They knew what all those numbers meant. So sometimes for us, when we're reading it for the first time, it's just like, ooh, wow, this must be more complicated than it. And of course, it never is. Prophecy has to harmonize with the rest of the Bible. You can't pull a prophecy out, like I said, in one section and say, this is the story, and then get to a very similar scenario in another book and say, well, this must mean the rapture. You know, and I'm jumping ahead there. You can't make things when they're saying the same thing. So it's got to be in context. It's got to be in harmony with the Bible. And I like this one. Sometimes it's easier to determine what the prophecy is not saying if you can't figure out what it is saying. You know, if you can determine, well, I know it's not talking about this. So let me dig somewhere else, or let me not make something up. So let me go back in context. Let me go back and read Jeremiah and Isaiah and see if I can find a similar scenario that's talking about the judgment that it's doing. And then number 4, determine where there might be support of that prophecy in the New Testament. And we're certainly going to see that with Daniel. Daniel's going to talk about Jesus, and Jesus is going to talk about Daniel. And that's the way it works. And it was the same thing for Isaiah and others. So again, just wanted to kind of go walk down memory lane for the first 6 chapters. We're getting into 4 chapters that talk a lot about prophecy and more stories and the detail of history that we're going to get into. So we just need to be reading it and studying it. You kind of need to do the same. Any other questions before we start? Just so you know, when I was finishing the characters, we've got God and Daniel and the angels, and we've got a couple of Babylonian, right? Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, and then a couple of Persian kings, at least one Darius. I think we may be talking about 2 Dariuses in these sections, and Cyrus, and a couple of people that tended to furnaces and lions' caves. That's kind of the whole scenario. Belshazzar wasn't like the direct son or direct descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. There was people in between those two. And though between the kings themselves, there was, I think, about 14 years difference. But you have, after Nebuchadnezzar, you have somebody named Amel-Marduk. Some sections, there's evil after that instead of Marduk. I guess it might mean the same thing. And it sounds kind of sinister, you know, like you're watching a TV show. But anyway, his name was Amel-Marduk. The next one was Neriglissar. The next one was Labashi-Marduk. And then the 4th one was the father of Belshazzar, which is a guy named Nabonidus. A lot of times the father and son co-reigned in the land. And in this case, Nebuchadnezzar went out somewhere else to fight a battle, to proclaim a war somewhere, and his son Belshazzar was left back to manage the kingdom all the way up until what? The big party where the wall and that kingdom was over under his run. So there's more going on there than just Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, just so you know that. And having said that, what was Daniel's slave name? Belshazzar, except it's with a T. I think those easy things. The king was Belshazzar. Daniel was Belteshazzar, which meant something different. Okay. All right. Enough of that. How's our time? What, I got 3 minutes? Okay. Well, let's just start it off this way. Look at chapter 7. We're going through 7 through 12. And I want to start with kind of put it in perspective. Look at the last verse of chapter 6. Verse 28. So this Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Finishes off with, and I'm not sure what part of that reign he was in when they said this. We might assume it was toward the end. I don't know. All we know is that by this time, he's pretty successful with the Persians. They've already been, and you almost wonder, did Daniel tell Cyrus about the prophecy that he read in Isaiah? Said he was going to, we don't read that. I don't think we read that, do we? No, but I wonder if he told him, you know, because that would have motivated him to say, these people are going home, you know, because he told me Jeremiah said this, or Isaiah said this. But anyway, so they're in this place where he's doing really well. And then we get to the first of Daniel chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a bit. Now, this is first year of Belshazzar. He reigned for 7 years. 7 years? 14 years. So now we've gone back in time, flashback, you know, if you're watching a movie, we've gone back 14 years to the first year that he was, that his dad let him be in control. First year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed, probably sleeping, half awake, whatever. And he wrote the dream down and related the following summary. I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And in verse 3, the 4 great beasts were coming up. We'll get to that. Now, what's interesting about that first verse? Us as just people reading this, what do we connect with what he says in that first verse? Anybody have a dream? Get up and roll over and write it down because you've been having these dreams. And anybody ever do that? I'm not going to confess to it if nobody else says yes. Okay. But people do that. And I don't know about you, but there's times when I will have that's just, it's so embedded in my head. And I want to wake up and say, oh man, I got to walk through this. And by the time I get up to go get a glass of water, it's gone. I mean, gone. I can't remember how it started, how it finished. How did I trouble myself for tossing and turning, and 3 seconds later after I wake up, the dream's gone. So when you do that, I'm not sure who tells you, doctors, whoever, but they'll say, keep a pencil and paper right next to your bed. And when you have that dream, get up, roll over, flick a light on, and write it down. No, I haven't done that. Okay. But this is what he does. This is how much it has affected him. He's like, wow. And when you look at this, and I know that we're going to compare chapter 7 to chapter 2, but there's a big difference. Number 1, in chapter 2, right? Gold head, silver chest thing. And it gets a little busy towards the end when God's rock hits the feet and it blows up and all that sort of thing. But this is saying the same thing, but much different. You've got action videos going on in this. You've got waters being stirred up by the 4 winds of heaven. I mean, these are, you know, try to imagine Daniel having this in his head in the middle of the night, laying in bed, and so much so, and I'm not sure what, you know, in those days, what the writing gear was, but this affects him so much he gets out of bed and he just starts writing it down. Whereas some of the other ones where he's interpreting, gives it to him, and he regurgitates it. Yes, sir.
To see the difference between dreams and visions. I know in the King James Version it says dreams and visions.
Say it louder.
Dreams and visions.
Dream and vision.
Between those two.
It says and vision. You're right. You're right. So yeah, he's got more than one thing going on. It may be referring to the same thing, but it certainly suggests a complicated story. Even if it sounds simple to us when we read it. Again, there's no standing statue there. It's not this stagnant creature. It's of, you know, if I'm dreaming that I'm, and I think this is kind of normal, I think sometimes, if you're something that you struggled with during that day and you find yourself dreaming, trying to swim through water, you ever do that? You can't get through it. It's dark, the water's dark, and I can't move. And in your dream, that's just like emotional. until you wake up and go, whew, that was just a dream. So this had to mean something to him, really impacted in that way. Yes, yeah, I know. She wants to tell a story. Go ahead. I'm in India, and she's having a dream, rolls over and just backhands me right in the eye. And in the middle of the night, I said, what did you do that for? She said that there was a bird chasing Noah. So yes, dreams can be interesting. Right, sweetie? She says, why did you say that? I said, you hit me in the eye. Just backhanded me in the eye. Okay. How's our time? Am I out of time? Okay. Oh, I knew that. Okay. So, I just wanted to take, it's just one of those things that we kind of pass over quickly, but when you read those lines and those words, he's struggling with this. This is something that's really going on. So, and again, we're going to let other context tell us or share with us similar meaning here. So he says, he's talking about 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. So we've got a sea and we've got winds. What is normally suggested when we talk about sea or great bodies of water? No. People. A group, seas, and again, we're going to look here. We're going to take the time to look. Sea or bodies of water. The glass sea in front of the throne in Revelation. There's a sense to suggesting there's a civilization or a group of people that's going on here. Where are the winds coming from that disturb this water on the ground? Huh? 4 winds of heaven. God sending these winds down. And the number 4, again, a biblical number suggesting basically from all corners. There's no corners and circles, I get it. But 4 represents a total review of these, God sending 4 winds from all directions to stir these waters up. And the 4 is also appropriate because we're talking about 4 kingdoms that are going to be prophesied in this book that match with chapter 2. So it fits. Sea is the people. God is sending the winds to stir them up for his purpose, using their own free will of choice, same way he does with us today, but he's going to use it for his purpose and hence the prophecy. Look at Jeremiah chapter 46. Go back a couple of pages, several pages before Daniel. There's Ezekiel before that and then Jeremiah. Jeremiah 46, 7 and 8. Says, who is this that rises like the Nile, like the rivers of these waters surge about? Egypt rises like the Nile. So he's comparing the waters that are rising with the river. Even like the rivers, those waters surge about. And he said, and I will rise and cover that land. I will surely destroy the city and its inhabitants. So he's talking about the people of Egypt, and he's comparing them to a body of water. Isaiah 17. Go back another chunk of pages. Isaiah 17. Verses 12 and 13. Alas, the uproar of many peoples who roar like the roaring of the seas. Seas, associating people with seas. And the rumble of the nations who rush on like rumbling of mighty waters. The nations rumble on like the rumbling of many waters, but he will rebuke them and they will flee away and be chased like chaff in the mountains before the wind, or like whirling dust before a gale. Again, wind and water, God in control, same thing. And there's a similar one in Revelation chapter 17, verse 15. I'm going to tell him myself again. So I'm cheating a little bit more because I have to do Revelation in the fall, and I'm kind of cheating by taking notes there. And I guess this morning I was talking to Barry, and I confused myself. Revelation has 24 chapters, and Daniel has 12. And I told him, I said, I think I found a mistake in a commentary. They referred to Revelation chapter 17, and there is no Revelation chapter 17. And Barry went, yeah, there is. And I said, I had to stop and say, there is. And Barry said, I'm pretty sure there's a 17. So there's not a chapter 17 in Daniel. I just wanted you to know I got that squared away. I'm good to go. So yes, so that's kind of what he's talking about. He is almost immediately talking about what we're going to read as these four kingdoms, these four beasts that he's going to bring out and talk about, that he is rumbling the waters up with the four winds from heaven to make them, not make them do something, use them because of the decisions they're going to make to attack and to capture, to do his will. Something that it's just hard for us to grasp. You know, I always think of Habakkuk. God, the system's broke, you need to fix it. God says, no problem. Stand by. And then Habakkuk says, wait, hold up. That's not what I was thinking about. God says, yeah, but that's my answer. The way I fix things is I roll enemies into you, I clean house, and that's how I fix things. We don't like to see things that way, but sometimes that's the way they're done, and it certainly is going to be done in this case that's going to last for several hundred years. This isn't a quick fix. This is something that people will not be alive for to see the end of. We all get to see it on this end of Daniel, where he got to see it on one end. A lot of people didn't see that. They just had to hear and listen and understand and believe. And four great beasts, verse 3, four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another, all different, as were these kingdoms. The first was like a lion that had wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet, and a human mind also was given to it. So, first of all, from an archaeological perspective, people that go back and dig around in Babylon, they find these drawings of what Babylon considered their staff. This lion with 6 wings on its back, 3 on one side, 3 other, or 2 wings. So it fits what they thought of themselves. Lions, roaring lions, flying through the air, attacking and doing all these kind of things. Rome would be the eagle, and everybody had their kind of symbol. So this happens, and so the first thing that happens is this lion that is growling and a predator and flying. 3 things happen to it, and we're associating this with who? Nebuchadnezzar. In what story? In the first 6 chapters, the big tree, right? The wings are plucked. So the first thing that happens to him is he's grounded. He can no longer fly. The second thing that happens to him is he can't run or fly anymore. He's on 2 feet and he stands up. So now he's grounded, and now he's slowed down. He's not moving as fast. And the third thing that happens to him is he becomes a man with a brain, which means he's no longer the predator. He's now the prey. All those things happen, and it just tells it in a more, apocalyptic type story, imagery type of story. That is what happened to Nebuchadnezzar back in the chapter 4 that we read, where he was basically chased out of civilization and running amok in the fields and all those kind of stuff. He went from being the big king to nobody and useless and helpless until such time as he was able to realize, and that's what God told him in that chapter, you're going to stay that way until you figure out who I am and who's the boss here. I love that. You think you're the king. Remember the story he told just before that? Like a year before that, he stood on his roof and he looked around at everything and he said, right here, buddy, I did that. I did all this. And then that scenario happens where he gets his wings plucked, where he's put on his feet instead of on all fours, and he becomes the prey instead of the predator. So that seems to be a pretty good association from 7 to 2. The golden head, which was Nebuchadnezzar, right, is this one that they're talking about here in chapter 7. Verse 5, and behold another beast, a second one, resembling a bear. And it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said, arise, devour, and devour much meat. Again, on this side of the prophecy, we know who they were talking about. They're talking about a 2-sided bear, which was the Persian or the Medo-Persian group that came in, the Persians that took out Babylon. And it makes specific reference to one side being higher than the others. Persians were in charge. They actually captured the Medes to make them one big nation, and hence the one side bigger than the other. The 3 ribs in his mouth, this is, and I like Homer Haley. He always kind of puts you in check. He says, I know that when we get to the 10 horns and the little horn and the 3 horns, we always like to go back because this is historical, and we like to name kings, and we like to name Caesars, and he says you don't necessarily have to fall into that trap because these are images, you know. Don't get trapped into thinking, okay, I'm now going to move from images and tell a specific story, because that's what people try to do in Revelation and it doesn't work. It doesn't mean that it doesn't fit. I'm just saying, he says, you know, 3, for example, in this case, the 3 ribs that you have in this bear's mouth. A lot of people refer that to Babylon, Egypt, and Lydia. Lydia was, I guess, what we, by the time we get to the New Testament, is Asia, right? So he captures Egypt and he captures Babylon and Lydia. Other people will say it's the 3 things that Cyrus owned, which was Egypt and Babylon and Media. You know, so you can try to put names into those 3 ribs, or you can say, you know what, that's just a biblical number. It's a complete number of 3. They conquered everybody. That's all the ribs have to mean. Is there was 2 kingdoms, one was a little more powerful than the other, and the number 3 means they got a hold of everybody. Now, could it mean Babylon and Egypt and Lydia? Sure. Does that make you sleep better? Go for it. You might have to get up and write that down. You know, if you have a vision and it's something other than Babylon and Egypt and Media, you better write that down and share it next week. But that's just the point. It's okay to do that. And when we get to Rome and the 10 horns, there's also this very good explanation about who those Caesars were, who the emperors were, and how the 10 and the 3 that go away and the 11th one that comes up, somebody did a real nice job of putting names to those. But you don't have to. 10 horns means you have all power, period. One that sticks up in the middle of those means he's now in charge. And a couple other fell along the wayside when this one came to us. So we don't have to make it that complicated. It's just fun to talk about so that you have an understanding of what it might be. So far so good? And I hear a bell, first or second. All right. We got through 2 creatures, talked about prophecy, told the funny story about Renee hitting me in the eye. And I'll hold the snake story for a Sunday night lesson, Renee petting the snake. You fed the snake too, right? Oh, you were the snake's food. Okay. We got out of there before we fed the snake. Anyway, appreciate your comments and your time, and look forward to picking it up again next week. Yes, ma'am.